they had to ask for 30,000 North Koreans to come to help them retake sovereign Russian land in the Kursk Oblast. Let's say that one more time. Russia had to have help to retake sovereign Russian land. Now Russia's having trouble manning its defense industries. They've got almost 30,000 North Koreans working in almost slave labor conditions in Russian factories now because they don't have the manpower to man them themselves. So Russia's trying to put this big face up that we're building new weapons, we're building lots of weapons, we're expanding our manpower, we're doing all this stuff. The reality is they have a huge manpower problem, and it's getting worse.
Hello and welcome to Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. And it's great to be back with General Philip Breedlove today. General Breedlove served for 39 years in the US military. He was Supreme Allied Commander Europe between 2013 and 2016, and was also Commander US European Command and Commander US Air Forces in Europe. He's a regular and valued guest here on Frontline. Great to see you again, Philip. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me back, Kate.
It's really good to talk to you right now because of this, what's happened in Poland, the downing of drones in its airspace in that mass overnight Russian aerial attack on Ukraine. It's being regarded as a first for NATO in its defense since the war began. How big a moment do you think it is?
Well, obviously today I'm going to offer you some of my own opinions, and my opinions are obviously colored by the fact that I lived in Europe 8 times and served in NATO starting as far back as 1982. And I would offer to you that it's been a long time coming. I think we should have done more already. We've had drones downed in Poland. We have drones downed in Romania. Mr. Putin continues to test this. None of this is happenstance. And I'm glad to see that Poland took the initiative to say enough.
So what was it to your mind? Was it a calculated attack on Poland, a violation of its airspace, or drones that went off course for whatever reason?
I've heard people using that word attack. I don't like it. I don't think that Russia intended to strike anything in Poland, but I absolutely believe this was a calculated incursion to continue testing the resolve of the West. And this is just a one in a long time. I mean, very recently inside Ukraine, Russia hit a U.S. factory, bombed a U.S. factory in Ukraine. And Mr. Putin is testing what the West is going to do. And I believe that after the sort of failed summit, he's got a lot of confidence and he feels empowered to do these things. And he's going to find out how far he can go.
And if he was testing the NATO response, the immediate military response, in terms of how quickly it came and the kind of aircraft and military defensive equipment that was used, how would you judge it? Was it successful?
Well, I think it was successful, first and foremost, along the lines of it shows we are now voicing or showing our resolve to push back. And the numbers are going to settle down over time. I've heard 19 drones, of which 4 were shot down. Would have been nice to have shot down more, but some of them maybe were only in the airspace for a short time. I'm not going to grade the paper, but it would have been nice to have eliminated them. It's also nice that NATO forces responded. You and I think, have actually discussed in the past that I'm not a real fan of NATO air policing. We are in a war in Europe. Whether we accept that or not, there's a war in Europe. And air policing is designed solely and completely for peacetime measures. There are no rules of engagement for wartime engagements in air policing. And so the Polish F-16s that responded, they are in their sovereign NATO territory, and they can react with wartime combat air patrol rules of engagement. But for the F-35s that responded, it's my guess they probably didn't shoot. They were there in response. They would have had to get an airborne change in rules of engagement to have been able to shoot.
And there are also some kind of reports coming out that some of these drones were decoys, and that some of them may have actually just run out of fuel and crashed. So actually the threat level was not so great, was it? But do you think what's happened now is now changing the way that NATO will respond in future, that everything that is judged as an incursion will now be shot down in NATO airspace?
Well, to your first point, you know, if 19 drones came in and a couple of them malfunctioned or whatever, it's still not about the number. It's about the intent. Make no mistake. I don't sign up to any of the proclamations that this was happenstance or it was a navigational error or whatever. Yeah, if you want to believe that, go right ahead. I'm an airman. I've been flying in Europe since 1982, and this was a deliberate push by Mr. Putin to see what he could do and what our response would be. And he gets an immediate sort of emotional propaganda lift in Russia that he's taking action, and he's taking it to NATO, and he's taking it to, you know, Poland. And so Mr. Putin stood to gain a lot from this, and it's important. But it's also important we responded, and we would have problems if Mr. Putin were to launch the size raids on NATO that he launched on Ukraine.
So what do you think Mr. Putin has taken away from this? What do you think he has learned?
Well, some good things on our side. He's learned that Poland's not going to put up with it. You know, there are other nations that are sort of willy-nilly on, okay, let's don't escalate. Let's find a way to de-escalate and all this. But what he found out is Poland's going to defend Polish airspace. And I think that's good. And I think he also learned that NATO is going to launch to support Poland. And that's very good. And he should take away with that this will not go unnoticed in the future. But I think we're going to have to figure out how to raise the cost of his adventurism.
So when you say that you're not a fan of air policing, what kind of, I mean, Poland has invoked Article 4. It wants to talk about its security. What are the options now? What are the kind of conversations that will be going on at NATO level to be discussing what can be done?
Those two subjects don't really touch each other well. Can I answer the air policing one first? And then we'll talk about the second one. So it's not that I'm not a fan of air policing. Air policing has a very real mission in peacetime. It is a peacetime mission with peacetime ROE. Do you think we're in peacetime in Europe?
I know what people in Poland exactly will be saying today.
I don't think we're in peacetime in Europe. Those who have blinders on and can't see very well don't understand that we have a theater level war going on in Europe. And so especially for the nations along the Eastern Front with Russia, the fact that we're flying airplanes with peacetime ROE, which restricts their ability to use weapons and things, this is not good. This is putting our airmen at risk and putting those on the ground we're supposed to be protecting at risk. We need to have wartime combat air patrol rules of engagement. So that's that answer. Do you want to still do the second one?
Yeah, go on. Let's go for it. Article 4.
Very few people know what Article 4 is. You know, and sometimes even fewer people know what Article 3 is. And arguably, Article 3 is more important to a SACEUR than Article 5. Article 4 is a simple tool. It's not bellicose, although it sends a clear message that a nation feels aggrieved and that they need to talk to the rest of the nations about possible responses to incursions, pressure, whatever you want to call it, by an enemy. And so here we had an enemy That's the way that we finally now have labeled Russia in all our war plans and documents. Our enemy has flown combat capability through the airspace of one of our nations. That nation is aggrieved and has asked the NAC, which is the true power of NATO. It's not the SACEUR and it's not the SecGen. They both actually work for the NAC. And this is a consultation in the NAC with the nations to say we are aggrieved and we think we need to take some action or at least consider action.
What kind of options might they be considering, though?
Changing the ROE of the air policing to combat air patrol. That's a message to Mr. Putin. Our aircraft are now airborne with the rules of engagement that would allow them to shoot down your missiles and drones if you send them through our airspace. It also sends a message we're ready to kinetically hard power defend NATO airspace and ground space. So there's lots of things to do. We could put caps up. We could raise the alert status of some of the alert forces of NATO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. May I just tell you that there's some real concern about the Zapad exercise this year.
Yes. Do you think that is related in any way to this instance?
Zapad can always be a tool.
Yeah. These are the exercises taking place between Russia and Belarus.
It's always a tool. Zapad means West. It means that Russia is practicing its war plan to attack the West. And so Zapad is always a concern.
The US response, Donald Trump posting on Truth Social, what's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go. Do you have any idea whether there's going to be, or what that meant, or whether there's going to be a more robust response from the US on this?
We need to back up just a little bit. When Russia struck the U.S. Business in Ukraine, that was no mistake either. That was sort of in the face of our president. When Russia struck that, we have given now Ukraine over 3,000 long-range surface-to-surface missiles. They're called ERAMs, all capitals, E-R-A-M, ERAMs. Now, these are not big, like ATACMS class missiles, but they are very precise. They have a nice long range, and they have a warhead that can do some real damage. So when Russia struck this American business in Ukraine, the president actually responded with sending new capability to Ukraine. Now we have Mr. Putin one more time in the face of our president and the West saying, we're going to fly through your airspace when we attack people. I think more is called for. I really believe more is called for. There are a couple of really good articles out there about some of the options. Things I really like is completely take the shackles off of Ukraine in respect to attacking deeply in Russia. As you know, the United States and the West, to some degree, have built a sanctuary for Russia. We've said, don't use our kit to attack into Russia. Although Russia is sending tens of thousands of missiles from all directions attacking Ukraine, we've told Ukraine, you can't use our kit to fire back. Time to eliminate that horrible, unthought policy and allow Ukraine to strike and eliminate this enabling device of building sanctuary for Russia. We should never be in that business. Never should we sanctuary for Russia.
And you have been an advocate of that for a long time, haven't you? And for the last month, we've seen Ukraine able to mount these repeated attacks on the same targets, hitting Russia's oil and gas refineries and infrastructure. And not only is it affecting fuel supply to the general public, but now facilities that supply fuel to Russian troops. How does Ukraine build this? And is it doing so into an effective strategy, do you think?
Well, first and foremost, Ukraine, because of the restrictions the West kept putting on them, have now started an industry that is growing in capability and in capacity, and they're firing their own indigenous stuff, which no one else has control over, into Russia. And because they don't have so many, they are fighting in very, I think, sophisticated, what we call counter force fight. Counter force means that Ukraine is targeting specific military targets like petrochemicals that would affect the military capability. And just by the flip side, we all see that Mr. Putin is fighting a counter value fight, which means that the vast, let me say it one more time, vast preponderance of the targets Russia are hitting are civilian targets. They're trying to destroy the idea of Ukraine and destroy the idea of the Ukrainian people.
You were saying earlier about US reaction, and we're still waiting to find out whether Donald Trump and this EU delegation that was heading out to Washington this week are going to come up with any kind of more agreement on tougher sanctions against Russia. I'm just wondering whether you expect that to happen, and if not, the kind of preparations you see Ukraine making for a long war, and if those strikes that we're talking about against oil refineries deep into Russia is a sign that they really believe they've got to be in it for the long haul.
Please, Kate, don't be angry at me, but I think they're already in a long war. I hear these people talk about this war is 3.5 years long. They really do not understand. This war is 11 years long. We had the first invasion of Crimea. Then we had the invasion of Lugansk, Donetsk, in the Donbass region. Then we had everybody thought the war was over, but we had a warm line of contact where Russians and Ukrainians were dying almost every day along that line of contact. And then we went into I think, the third phase of this 11-year-long war when they did the massive attack into Ukraine. And so Ukraine is already trying to figure out how to fight a long war. This is an existential war. And as I said before, Mr. Putin is not terribly worried about beating the Ukrainian military. He's trying to break the will of the people. He's trying to destroy Ukraine, and he's trying to convince Europe that he's going to fight longer than Europe will fight, so that Europe will give up and give him what he wants. And so Ukraine, I think, is already and is now getting much better at preparing for taking the fight to Russia. How many missiles fall on the capital of Kyiv every night now? If that many missiles were falling on Moscow every night, this war would take a very different turn.
And Ukraine preparing to take and continue to take the fight to Russia. Russia appears to be doing the same in the sense that its main military intelligence directorate says Ukraine's does, sorry, I'm going to say that again. Ukraine building up and its capabilities to sustain a long fight into Russia. Russia appears to be doing the same. Ukraine's main military intelligence directorate says Russia is expanding its defense industrial base, ramping up its missile and drone production, and locating much of its defense enterprises. Were you waggling your finger? Go on.
So let's also review a few things. They make all of these grand pronunciations, but Russia is having a massive manpower problem. Remember, they had to ask for 30,000 North Koreans to come to help them retake sovereign Russian land in the Kursk Oblast. Let's say that one more time. Russia had to have help to retake sovereign Russian land. Now Russia's having trouble manning its defense industries. They've got almost 30,000 North Koreans working in almost slave labor conditions in Russian factories now because they don't have the manpower to man them themselves. So Russia's trying to put this big face up that we're building new weapons, we're building lots of weapons, we're expanding our manpower, we're doing all this stuff. The reality is they have a huge manpower problem, and it's getting worse.
So how long do you think President Putin can sustain this war?
As long as he believes he's going to win, he will fight. And as long as he believes and convince the Russian people that they're going to win, he's going to fight. And that's why I've been laughed at and scoffed at a little bit, because I've said one of the first things the West has to do is what Mr. Putin does all the time. the West, senior leaders of the West, and I think that includes the American president, they have to go out loud and proud publicly in a declaratory manner and say, Mr. Putin, you will not win this war. We will ensure you do not win this war. That's the start, because he's got the Russian people have to get the message that the West is now united in this guarantee. And then we have to put an exclamation point on those very loud, proud, public declaratory policies by putting military might in the hands of the Ukrainians to start making Russia pay. And Ukraine is doing that now. And the cost of gas and oil and the loss of revenue to the government is starting to show that.
So when President Zelensky said that President Putin, in a meeting with Steve Witkoff, the US envoy, had told him that they planned and they were going to take Donbass by the end of the year, what's President Zelensky's motivation for expressing that publicly?
Well, I think President Zelensky is trying to out what he believes is a fact and what I believe is a fact, and that is Mr. Putin has never been a partner in peace for Ukraine. Mr. Putin is not now a partner in peace for Ukraine, and Mr. Putin will never be a partner in peace for Ukraine. But Mr. Putin keeps stringing along Western leaders and, frankly, my president by sort of big teaser out there. Yeah, we'll work out a peace deal, but, I need a few more months to pound Ukraine and we'll work it out. And I think that Mr. Zelensky is trying to point out to the West what most of us already know, and that is Mr. Putin has absolutely zero intention of ever negotiating a peace for Ukraine. Zero.
So what part do you think tougher sanctions could realistically play? Because even following Russia's biggest air attack on Ukraine at the weekend, where it targeted government buildings for the first time, those calls for tougher sanctions on Russia, we're still waiting for the results from that meeting that presumably is being taking place in Washington between the EU delegation.
So sanctions help. They help. They hurt the Russian people. They hurt the Russian economy. They hurt the country of Russia. But let's be really, straightforward. We have to be intellectually honest. Sanctions have never changed the battlefield actions of Mr. Putin. I'll say that one more time. Sanctions have never changed the battlefield actions of Mr. Putin. So we have to understand that sanctions will be about weakening his support base, but you should not expect that sanctions are going to change anything he does, on the ground out there. And I would offer that the very first thing we should do, because it's loud and proud and it will hurt a whole bunch of oligarchs right below Mr. Putin, we ought to spend every penny of the seized money around the world, spend it on weapons for Ukraine. Loud, proud, publicly telling those oligarchs and the Russian people, thank you very much for your contribution to Ukrainian defense.
And what do you think about the proposition by the former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who told the Ukraine Defence Forum in London this week, the coalition of the willing shouldn't wait for any security guarantees from the US and actually just deploy troops to Ukraine immediately to send a political message to Putin and demonstrate Ukraine's integration into Western security architecture? Is that realistic?
That's a tough question. I would applaud such a move, because I think it would be really hard for the other nations of NATO and the United States to not then become more involved in the process. I do believe that a durable peace in Ukraine is going to take, in some way or form, a U.S. presence. And if the EU or NATO forces decide to contribute to a coalition of the willing and do that on the ground, then I think it's completely appropriate that the United States supply that air overwatch, transportation, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and all the things that air power bring to an issue.
And his point was that you need more to move from symbolic promises to this kind of visible troop presence, and that it's that will shift Putin's calculations and push him towards compromise. Do you think that will have it would have the desired effect?
Well, it begins to accomplish what we just talked about, and that is will start to make Mr. Putin wonder, can he win this war? If we say, no further, this is where it stops, we're now the backplate. That's a big deal for Mr. Putin because he needs to win, because if and when the Russian people start thinking about 1.1 million casualties and all of the rubles that have gone, and we're not taking Ukraine, which was what was promised, then Mr. Putin's power base begins to erode. And that for him is fatal.
And just to finally reflect on the anniversary of 9/11, with what's happened in Poland, people have been wondering whether or not Article 5 would be invoked, and that's been decided that it won't be. This was the only time when Article 5 was invoked, and you were in the Pentagon on that day. What are your memories of that?
Well, it was a tough morning, and I can't tell the whole story. We don't have enough time, but I was there serving as the senior military assistant to the Secretary of the Air Force. And, we had to evacuate our room because the smoke was coming in. We had to go to a bunker. And then we were ran out of the bunker because of dense smoke and fire, and had to evacuate the Pentagon to a location I can't talk about. And we had to try to run the Air Force and our Air Force reply to 9/11 from that austere location, and watching the decisions of our most senior leaders on what to do with the airplane full of Americans that was still hurtling at the White House. That was a really, really tough day. We lost friends. My church lost 2 gentlemen in the airplane that crashed into the Pentagon. Families lost people. For a long time in Washington, those of us who had to keep working, families, we couldn't talk to them on the phones. The phones weren't working, and families didn't know if their loved ones had made it through the crash in the Pentagon. It was a tough time, and for our nation, there's one good news piece. For weeks, if not a couple of months, the United States was whole. We were united, and none of this left and right bickering and politics and political things. All that stuff got swept behind, and we were Americans. And I loved that. It was a good time. The tragedy was horrific. The loss of life was horrific. But what happened in America for a while was what we all pray for.
General Philip Breedlove, really important thought to finish on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com.